Some places on Earth are meant to remain completely silent. The deep, frozen wilderness of the Alaskan interior is one of them. It is a hostile, unforgiving landscape where the only sound should be the howling wind and the occasional crack of shifting ice. This is the heart of the Alaskan Triangle, a place where more people disappear per capita than anywhere else on the planet. But on the night of November 14, 2021, the silence at a remote seismic monitoring station near Mount Hayes was broken. Not by a storm, not by an earthquake, but by a sound that defied every known law of geology. Within 4 hours of the initial detection, all communication with the outpost was severed. By sunrise, the airspace was restricted. Unmarked military transports touched down on a hastily cleared ice runway, and heavily armed personnel secured the perimeter. The scientists stationed there were quietly extracted, their hard drives confiscated, and the facility was permanently sealed. The official explanation offered months later? A simple equipment malfunction coupled with a localized minor avalanche. But you don't send elite tactical units to secure a broken thermometer. You send them when you dig too deep and wake something up. Today, we look at the Mount Hayes anomaly, the day the Earth spoke back. To understand the weight of what happened, we have to look at the facility itself. Officially known as Outpost 74, it was a brutalist concrete bunker buried partially into the permafrost, part of a broader network of United States Geological Survey monitoring stations. Its public mission was entirely mundane: track tectonic movements, monitor minor tremors, and provide early warnings for seismic events. The team consisted of just 5 people, 3 geophysicists, a systems engineer, and a facility manager. Their days were a repetitive cycle of analyzing pages of white noise in a cramped, metallic environment where the sun barely rose above the horizon. They were trained to recognize the signature of the planet. Earthquakes are chaotic. They are the messy, violent reality of a living world. On a monitor, they look like jagged, unpredictable scribbles, a visual representation of rock grinding against rock. But at 2:14 a.m., the primary deep-bore sensor, buried 3 miles beneath the ice, registered something that chilled the lead engineer to the bone. It wasn't a crack. It wasn't a rumble. It was a rhythmic, synthetic pulse. According to leaked telemetry data that briefly surfaced before being scrubbed from the internet, the signal was terrifyingly precise. A low-frequency hum followed by a heavy, mechanical thud. Exactly every 14.8 seconds. It didn't taper off, and it didn't increase in intensity. It was constant, stable, artificial. In the silence of the station, the staff began to realize that they weren't just looking at data on a screen. They could feel it. A faint vibration in the soles of their boots. A rattle in their coffee mugs. A rhythmic pressure in their inner ears that matched the 14.8-second cycle. Geological events do not have a heartbeat. Nature is random, violent, and messy. It does not operate on a precise, metronomic schedule. Worse still, when the team ran the triangulation protocols, the results were impossible. The source of the anomaly was located roughly 22 miles directly beneath Mount Hayes. To put that in perspective, that is deep within the Earth's mantle, a place where temperatures exceed 1,000 degrees and pressures are so extreme that solid rock begins to flow like thick plastic. At that depth, there are no voids. There are no caves. There is no space for a machine to operate, and certainly no environment where anything biological could survive. And yet, the rhythmic pounding continued, vibrating through the very crust of the planet. It was as if something massive, something constructed of a material unknown to science, was breathing or pumping deep within the foundations of the world. The team realized then that they weren't looking at a geological fluke. They were listening to a heart, or a machine, that had been waiting in the dark for eons. The station's lead geophysicist, realizing the staggering impossibility of the data, knew he didn't have much time. He immediately attempted to initiate an emergency upload of the raw, uncompressed audio files directly to the mainland servers in Seattle. In the frantic darkness of the control room, the progress bar became a lifeline. But the system was monitored by eyes far more powerful than a civilian geological survey. He managed to transmit exactly 42 seconds of the subterranean heartbeat before the entire station's network was remotely disabled. This wasn't a power failure. The lights stayed on, the heaters continued to hum, but the digital uplink simply vanished. Someone, somewhere, had a kill switch for Outpost 74. For the next 3 hours, the team existed in a terrifying state of sensory isolation. The satellite phones provided only a mocking, empty silence. The backup emergency radios produced a wall of static so thick it felt physical. And beneath their feet, the 14.8-second pulse continued. Only now, without the distraction of their equipment, they realized the vibration was getting sharper. It was no longer a dull thud. It was a metallic, resonant strike, like a massive hammer hitting an anvil 20 miles below. At precisely 5:30 a.m., the first helicopters crested the jagged ridges of Mount Hayes. They arrived in total blackness, flying without transponders or navigation lights. These weren't standard Coast Guard or National Guard units. They bore no official insignia, no flags, no identification numbers. Operatives in specialized Arctic tactical gear breached the facility with a level of aggression that signaled this was not a rescue mission. It was a sanitization. The 5 scientists were not treated as colleagues or even as citizens. They were immediately separated, their faces covered, and their personal belongings, from wedding rings to cell phones, confiscated. There was no briefing, no explanation. While the team was being hauled toward the waiting transport, they could hear the high-pitched scream of blowtorches inside the facility. The military wasn't just taking the servers, they were melting them. The deep-bore sensor cables, the result of a decade of scientific engineering, were severed and capped with thermal charges, collapsing the boreholes and permanently burying the evidence. The priority wasn't to understand what was under the mountain. The priority was to ensure the world remained deaf to its heartbeat. In the months that followed, the 5 individuals who witnessed the Mount Hayes anomaly began to fade from the public record. A routine government bulletin eventually noted that Outpost 74 was decommissioned due to unrecoverable structural instability. The official narrative insisted that a faulty sensor loop had created a feedback echo. But a feedback loop doesn't explain why 5 highly respected scientists have never returned to their academic posts. It doesn't explain why their research papers have been pulled from digital archives or why their families were issued non-disclosure agreements under the threat of national security prosecution. They didn't just lose their jobs, they lost their identities. The true chilling climax of this story came in 2023, when a former defense contractor leaked a series of encrypted memos before disappearing. He claimed that the military hadn't intervened to stop the signal from being heard. They intervened because the signal had changed. According to his testimony, the 14.8-second pulse wasn't a machine functioning, it was a countdown. And the moment the geophysicists at Outpost 74 began to observe it, the rhythm, the heartbeat, began to accelerate. Whatever is buried 22 miles beneath the Alaskan ice isn't a natural formation. It's an architecture, an intelligence that has been dormant for longer than human history. And according to the final leaked telemetry, when the military finally sealed the mountain, the countdown had already reached its final phase. We look up at the stars and wonder if we are alone, completely ignoring the vast, crushing dark beneath us. We think we own this planet, but we are just living on the skin of something much older and much larger. Perhaps the real question isn't why the government evacuated the mountain. The real question is, what happens when the countdown finally reaches 0?